Why Skyrim became so popular? What makes the game so unique that even after 14 years, new players that never played the Elder Scrolls games before, are enjoying such an old game? I've made this video a while ago, where I explored the cons of Skyrim, and I dug up quite a few. So, why is the game so popular if it has so many cons? What is the secret of Skyrim popularity? And why has this popularity not faded with time? Let's figure it out. And I propose to start with the main marketing slogan of the test series, and Skyrim in particular. You can become whoever you want and do whatever you want. And although the words whoever you want and whatever you want should actually be put in quotation marks, no one would dare to deny that Skyrim gives the player incredible freedom. Your character enters the world of the game as a blank sheet of paper. Your character has no personality other than the one that you will play. And the character has no past. There's only future that you will write down. Now let's take a look at another very popular role-play game, The Witcher 3. Geralt has personality, a past, and Geralt cannot escape his fate being a Witcher. Yes, you as Geralt may simply not complete the main missions, but you as a player, you cannot escape from Geralt being a Witcher. You will be perceived as a Witcher by NPCs. Or let's take Commander Shepard for example. Although in Mass Effect series the player has many opportunities to influence the plot, you still cannot escape from the fact that Shepard is a soldier and he has his own goals. And no matter what Shepard does, the result will be the same. It is work in the interest of the galaxy. You get the idea. This is not only The Witcher, but Mass Effect is like this, and in almost all games. You can't escape your fate in Dragon Age, and even in Baldur's Gate 3, the ideal RPG, you can't escape your fate. Yes, you can choose different storylines, but as they say, all roads lead to Rome. Yes, technically Skyrim and test games also have main quests, but they don't have such a strong emphasis on it. I mean, it is not an uncommon situation when a player puts in Skyrim hundreds of hours, but didn't progress the main storyline further than tutorial. That's the kind of freedom that I'm talking about. The game doesn't require for you to progress in the main questline, at all. You left the tutorial area, now you're free to go, wherever you want. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any game that has such freedom. Some people say that it is shallow, but people actually like shallowness. It leaves you a lot of room to fill the gaps with your imagination. Now, Skyrim gives you a lot of freedom in terms of gameplay as well. For example, you can play as an assassin, a thief, a druid, a warrior, a mage, a blacksmith, and so on. So there are a lot of builds that you can do, though some playstyles may be better than the others. Moreover, in Skyrim you can combine all of those playstyles. In many games there are clear restrictions and separations. A mage cannot use weapons and wear armor, but in Skyrim there are no such restrictions. That's why Skyrim is such a replayable game in terms of gameplay. There are hundreds of different builds videos on YouTube, and no wonder. The game has a large variety of passive effects from enchanted items, from characters' race, and from signs. With enough practice and grind, you can create almost an invincible character. Now, before we move on, let me quickly promote myself. I make videos on a broad variety of video game topics, such as a summary of everything we know about The Witcher 4, or an objective Veilguard critique, and so on. So leave a like and subscribe to be better informed. Now, since we have mentioned builds, let's talk about the progression in Skyrim. It should be noted that a very cool feature of leveling in Skyrim, and in test series in general, is that the leveling depends on how often you use a particular skill. This adds realism and rewards the player for their efforts. Although we can't say that this system works perfectly in Skyrim, because for example there are skills in the game that are leveling very slowly, such as restoration for example, and you also need more perks to activate the skills that you deserve than there are in the game, which is sad, but in general this concept is very cool. The direct opposite of this leveling system is for example Mass Effect games, where it doesn't matter what you use, you level up with perks that come from general experience from completing missions and eliminating enemies. It is also worth mentioning how many different variations of loot there are in the game. It complements the feeling of progression, and it encourages the player to explore new dungeons. It is also important to mention that in Skyrim, loot is constantly progressing. At the beginning of the game, you only come across iron weapons and armor, then steel, elven, and so on. But that's the case not only with common weapons. If you didn't know, in Skyrim, you can use cheat codes to get into the room with all items in the game. There you can see that there are different variations of quest items. For example, there are several variations of Nightingale sword. Depending on what level you are, you will get a sword with the same name, but with different stats. On the one hand, it is a bit unfair, but if the player doesn't know this, it won't hurt. Besides, when you level up, you will get stronger weapons, so in the end, you are not missing out. Now, Skyrim can be called a game with simple mechanics. The game is not overloaded with different options. For example, a game from Bethesda, Fallout 4. The game is overloaded with mechanics like crafting items and building. Now look, to craft something in Fallout 4, you need the spare parts. And not only that, but you need to remember what spare parts you need, and where those spare parts come from. Then you need to carry all that junk with you. You can't disassemble it. But hold your horses, you can't upgrade your gear yet. You have to acquire the necessary skills. But hold your horses, you can't acquire the necessary skills unless you have the required level. But hold your horses, you still can't acquire the skills unless you have leveled the required attributes. And all of that you as a player need to keep in mind and consider. And there's nothing wrong with that in itself. But there's a big but. In Skyrim, no one forces you to do all of this. You can easily not forge anything or brew anything. But in Fallout there are quite a few missions where you have to build something. In the main story, in the DLCs, and in side missions. That is, these additional mechanics are mandatory. Often, to complete a quest in Fallout 4, I had to interrupt the flow of the gameplay to find certain resources. But in Skyrim, there is no overload of mechanics. Everything you need can be found, be it equipment or potions. The game is easy to understand, but if you want to go deeper, you can. It is your choice. Apart from the mechanics, Skyrim can be called beautiful from a visual point of view, even after all these years. Let me put it this way. The further you look, the more beautiful the game is. Of course, compared to modern games, Skyrim can't compete in terms of textures. But Skyrim is very well done in terms of landscapes. Literally every screenshot of the landscape can be a desktop wallpaper. In addition to the landscape, Skyrim has a great color scheme and design. The design of armor, weapons, and buildings. That's why, even after all these years, Skyrim can still be considered a visually beautiful game. Now, on the other hand, the closer you look, the worse the game looks. The textures of Skyrim cannot compete with modern games. That being said, it is similar to From Software games. From Software games are also beautiful from afar, but ugly at close. However, there are many ways in which Skyrim can be considered beautiful. And all of this beauty is teeming with activities. Hundreds of locations on the map that you won't get a quest for, unless you decide to explore the world yourself. Exploration in Skyrim is very addictive. You don't just follow the directions, you take the initiative and embrace the spirit of adventure. And by doing so, you would stumble upon some cool quests, like a magician that makes the souls of dead adventurers guard his work. And you yourself fall into his trap and almost become another soul guarding his research. Or maybe you would come across Alduin, who resurrects his dragon minions. And although battles with dragons are not that interesting, it is quite pleasant to see Alduin resurrect his fellow dragons, not in a scripted mission, but just by exploring the world. It creates the illusion that the world of the game is alive. And when you get tired of completing quests and exploring the world, there's also stuff like the lore. And the lore of the test series is really deep, maybe even as deep as in Warhammer. So, if you love the test series, you definitely have something to learn. Hundreds of in-game books on various topics. By the way, the books are written by in-game authors. That is, not all the information in the books is true. This gives room for imagination and reflection on various topics. And if you are too lazy to figure it all out yourself, There are thousands of videos on YouTube on various lore topics, from the formation of dynasties to the study of Daedra, from the nature of magic to the history of the creation of the world, according to the mythology of different races. Different races may have their own view on the formation of the world, and it can differ quite a bit. So even if you spent like 200 hours and completed SKYRIM, then there is always something interesting for you to learn about the lore of the universe, and it can take hundreds of hours too. And finally, I have to mention mods. You can play with or without mods, but this opportunity is always there. And I'm not just talking about all these silly mods that replaces the dragons with Thomas the Train or stuff like that. No, there are quite serious mods that can, for example, diversify the magic in the game. That is, they add different spells. I once played with such a mod, and I liked it. Mods for cool weapons and for cool armor. Mods for different locations, for example for a house. If you want a more fancy house, then it's absolutely real. I'm not a big mod fan, I like my games raw, the way it was intended by the devs. But you can have a little fun, and that's always great. And that's it for today, but there's more where it came from. Why won't you go and watch this video? Or this one? Or any other? Also, don't forget to subscribe and leave a generous and glorious like to this video. See you later.